lot of people write, like, if you have any questions, just email me, right? All right. If you have any questions, let's jump on a call. I always put that down because I think that is part of what they're paying for. We've gotten into a culture where it's email. And I think that when someone says, hey, let's talk, let's connect as humans, it comes off as something refreshing.
Introducing Checkwriters, a video podcast for people who want to help their employees, colleagues, and organizations flourish and succeed. I'm your host, Dakota Hebert, Chief Marketing Officer at Checkwriters. Along with my co-host, HR Manager Felicia Corbeil, we'll hear from business leaders and pros who share captivating stories from their respective industries. Join us as we uncover their strategies and get unique inspiration for building great processes and experiences at your own organization. Check out and subscribe to Checkwriters on Apple, YouTube, or wherever you listen and watch your favorite shows. Thanks for watching. Strategies and best practices for defending your business from a dreaded I-9 audit. In this episode of Checkwriters, we're talking with attorney Ari Farkas, who is the founding and managing partner of A. Farkas Attorneys at Law. They focus exclusively on U.S. immigration and nationality law for businesses and individuals here and abroad. Ari counts amongst his clients executives, international personalities, government officials, scientists, consultants, and internationally acclaimed artists, chefs, and performers and their families. Ari has represented individuals and entities, both for-profit and nonprofit, from over 70 countries. He also heads up the firm's pro bono efforts, which is a matter of great pride for Ari and the firm. So I-9s might sound simple, but there are tons of pitfalls to avoid. I-9 audits are routinely on the rise and fines are high. An audit is really the last distraction you need. Listen to these tips from Ari to prevent potential audits. Learn best practices for I-9s and H-1B visas and related matters, and what to do if you are audited for I-9 compliance issues. All right, so Ari, very good to welcome you here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
First off, we just want to jump right into it. We can get into some stories and anecdotes throughout the interview, but to cover some basics, so me and Felicia and our audience can be on the same page. What is the I-9?
That's a good question. Well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. So the I-9 dates back to 1986 with the Immigration Reform Control Act. It is, I think, the single most disliked form in immigration law. What happened is they essentially, the U.S. government deputized every employer in the United States and said, you need to go and make sure that to verify the employment authorization of every employee who works for you. And unlike being paid a salary, in this case, failure to comply actually results in a liability. Fines can be levied for it. So essentially the I-9 has changed form. The form itself has changed slightly, but it consists of a number of parts. The first part is generally filled out by the employee. It's filled out on the first day. It has to be completed on the first day or before the first day of work. Then you have 3 more days to complete the second portion of it. So the first one is by the employee. They put in their name. They can put in their social security number. They don't have to. They complete that first section. And then the employer or a designated person from the employer will then check the documentation that evidences their ability to work in the U.S. So for example, if I'm a U.S. citizen, it's very simple. I could bring my passport, and that would be sufficient because it has a picture on it. And so you need to bring a document from either one document from the list A, or one from B and one from C. And B and C is essentially one document proving work authorization, let's say a social security card, and then one document proving who you are, like a driver's license. And that would also meet the criteria. The company would then record that information, right? So they have 3 days. So if, let's say, you had an employee starting on Monday, by end of work on Thursday, section 2 has to be completed, all right? They record this information, and then this information is then kept, preferably in a separate file, away from the rest of the HR files, and it has to be maintained by the company for the lesser of 3 years or 1 year beyond termination. So if I worked for a year, then it has to be kept for 2 more years. If I worked for 4 years, then just 1 year past termination, a 3-year period. That's essentially what the I-9 form is. There's a lot of subtlety that goes into this form. There's a lot of law behind it. For example, you can't ask for specific documents. The employee must be able to review the documents and decide what they want to provide. So there was a large chain, a restaurant chain, that specifically said we want to see these documents, and they settled a multi-million-dollar settlement with the Department of Justice on this because they said we want to go above and beyond.
Was that a recent?
I think it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. I was looking for the judgment, and I found a lot of other judgments against them, but I hadn't find that one judgment against them. On the flip side, though, the requirement to check someone's authorization, even when they provide the documents they want to provide, is you cannot feign that you didn't know. Like, oh, here's some documents, and 6 people with the exact same name.
The company can't feign, or the
company
employee?
can't feign
Okay.
not knowing. And so the flip side of that is another very large retail store in the area throughout the United States. What they would do is they just kind of were very loose about it. And they also had a multi-million-dollar settlement because they were saying, well, whatever the documents they bring in, we'll look them over. How do we know what they are? But if you have constructive knowledge, if you have 18 people with the same social security card and the same name, then you have knowledge of the issues.
Well, I mean, that it sounds just from what you've been saying so far that there's plenty of pitfalls. It's a bit of a minefield. So hence our title, Defending Your Business from an I-9 Audit, Strategies and Best Practices. But I think that's good. But one of the interesting things you said that I think we're going to get into a little bit later is the record keeping requirements, keeping them in separate files. That's pretty. I understand that's a question that we've had a lot from just our own clients. Like,
Certainly.
where do I keep it? How long do I have to keep it? Do I have to update it if I rehire? So we'll get into all that. But this kind of goes into our next question because I think you mentioned it. So what are some of the more recent changes to the I-9?
So they update the I-9 from time to time. That's actually one of the concerns, or one of the things you should be looking for, is the date of the I-9. You have to use one that is appropriate for the date. So, for example, if you had an I-9 in the past, I think it's 4 months, there was a new I-9 put out. And the major change between this I-9 and previous ones is they included a separate section for re-verification and a separate section for translators or people who help you. So the first section of the I-9, you cannot fill this out for the client, but if you were for the employee, if you were to do so, you'd have to record yourself as a translator or preparer on one of the schedules. Historically, there was a small line for that. Now they've given you a full page for it, and the same thing for re-verification, which means let's say you had someone who was working for you for 4 months, and they left to another position, and then they came back a year later. This really applies mostly. We see this a lot in seasonal work, right? We have a lot of people who come work for stores during the holidays to keep up with retail, and they have to be re-verified. You don't need to fill out a new I-9 form, and that's why they've created this where it has a full page. It used to be it was one line in the bottom for re-verification. Now it's a full page. The other aspect of re-verification applies to somebody whose documents expire. So there are a lot of visa types. For example, the L visa, intercompany transfer. So the spouse of an L visa holder, they can work in the U.S. from the moment they arrive. They don't need to get an employment authorization document. Their time in the U.S. is generally 3 years. So if they're working for you for 3 years, it comes to the end, you need to re-verify their document because they need to now get essentially an extension. Their spouse would get a 3-year or 2-year extension, rather, and then you would have work authorization for 2 years. That's where that would go. So that was a major change. It doesn't sound major, but from our perspective, it was a major change because it meant that we didn't have to necessarily fill out a brand new I-9 when we ran out of room for re-verification.
And so when you re-verify somebody, is it one of those things, if you have an employee who works for you for 20 years, every time their document expires, so if it expires every 4 years or every 5 years, is that every 5 years, no matter how long they've worked for you, you're still re-verifying it every single time?
So it depends on the document. For example, if you have a passport, there's no need for re-verification. That's proven the ability and that stays. The same thing with a green card. So even green cards expire after 10 years. You don't need to re-verify. But if you have someone who's working on a visa, there are visa types that are extendable where the spouse can work. This was under, I believe it was under the Obama administration, where they established that spouses of H-1B holders who had approved perms, and there's a green card waiting for them, but they happen to be from a country where there isn't a green card available today. For example, if you're an Indian national, it's about a 15-year wait till the green card is available. They're
Is that country dependent?
It's country. There are only a couple of countries that have such a high number. China, the Philippines, India. And so in those cases, it'll be 15 years. So under the Obama administration, they extended a work authorization to the spouses. The normal H-1B, their spouse cannot work. They're not work authorized. But if they're awaiting a green card because there isn't one available, then they're granted. So in a case like that, you might have 15 years where every 3 years their documents need to be reauthorized. And sometimes, in some cases, you might have to authorize them twice because they may get an extension notice, like say in the case of an L, they'll be able to extend, but they haven't received, and this is more in the case of, let's say, an L visa holder. So they'll make the application, they continue working while the application is pending. So that's first re-verification because now their L status expired, and then you put in the receipt number. You have to describe it. And then the approval notice comes in. So now you have a new approval. So now you have a second re-verification that gets placed on that. And as I said, historically, you ran out of space on the old I-9. So this new I-9 form at least gives us a little bit more room for these re-verifications as they come up.
We're going to get into the H-1B visa a little bit more later on in our talk. Or as one person called it to me, the H-1N1 visa. Heard that?
I've never heard that.
That's only if you're sick.
Well, we can talk about, let's shift to the H-1B for a moment.
You want to? Sure.
Yeah, only because there's, so this is slightly not off topic per se, but it's just, immigration law is divided into essentially three areas. So the first area is what we call benefits, which is visas for people to come to the United States. And that can be for employment-based or family-based. And a lot of our family-based arises out of our employment base. So, for example, just yesterday, got a phone call from a client.
So you're saying people relocating, but they're relocating their whole family, obviously, for the job.
Correct.
Okay.
But then there's another aspect. So, for example, if they came into the U.S. initially on a visa type. So I've had this client for years. And this is one of the nice things about immigration law, is I've literally worked with people for 10 years now. And we're constantly, every couple of years, we reconnect and talk. And, they just had another kid and what's going on with them and move jobs. And it's
more
really
personal than people might assume when they hear immigration attorney.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a personal relationship here because, I completely understand how important this is. I mean, this is your life, right? Let's say you want to buy a house and it falls through. Okay, to fix that, you may find another house, maybe a lawsuit, whatever it is. But in immigration, if there's something goes wrong, then, you've restarted your life in the U.S. and now you have to leave or you can't come to the first place. So it's a very high stress area for our clients. And we totally understand that. Even for our employment, though, we have companies that open up sales offices in the U.S. and they need to get a specific engineer into the U.S. who really can support sales, right? The company needs this. They recognize this is the person who's going to do it, or a CEO after they get a substantial round investment. In those cases, it's not just necessary, but it's almost that the entire new operation or new whatever they're attempting to do, whether it's opening a sales office or research facility, these things require this person to be there. This is mission critical, essentially. And so without having those people here, then we recognize that, and we understand that's our responsibility in this relationship is to assist them to get it open. So I was saying, so this one client, so the wife is a managing director at a very well-known consulting firm. I did her naturalization many years ago. Then she met a fella on vacation. They started dating. And so I started on the business side. But the next thing we're doing, the visa for the spouse.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then they have two kids.
Into that. Yeah.
And then now I did her parents too, to relocate them to the U.S. as well. So here we are now, and now the spouse is ready to naturalize. So the entire life cycle, we've been together for years. And so, getting on the phone is like catching up with old friends. And that's part of what I enjoy. And I also like the fact that we're relied upon by these companies, by these individuals. We're given that it's a privilege and it's a responsibility to represent them and get them to where they want to be.
Yeah.
So that's it. So talk about visas, though, just on the H-1B. Yesterday at noon, the H-1B lottery opened.
Oh, wow.
We
didn't even plan it that way.
Yeah.
There we go.
Perfect
Some
timing.
Timely H1N1 news. Or H1B.
H-1B.
You know who said H1N1 to me?
Who said it?
It was Lisa.
Really?
I
And I
knew you
said,
were
Lisa,
gonna
it's
say
the
that.
H1B, but she won't mind that I'm calling her out. But the thing is, now it's like in my head is H1N1, no matter what I do.
So the lottery opened yesterday. It's going to go till the 22nd, and we'll know who was selected.
It's only open for that?
It's that short period. So
Wow. Why is that?
Well, so there are 65,000 available spots
Okay.
for H-1B applications.
And is it first come, first serve?
So it's not a first. It's always been a lottery for as long as I've practiced. Actually, there was a time where it took 6 months, 7 months before the H-1B was oversubscribed. I remember the first H-1B I filed was in November of the year, and by December 15th, it was already oversubscribed. If, however, they received more, this is the way it historically was, Their clients would pay us to put together the full H-1B application. We'd submit it. We had from April 1st to the 5th. I mean, FedEx trucks were just backing up into the locations. And then they would do a lottery. If they were oversubscribed on the first day, they would do a lottery and then send you back the applications that weren't selected. So we wouldn't know who was selected, who wasn't
Got it.
selected until, a few weeks later. And then they announced they're changing it. They're putting in a lottery. So there are 65,000 spots for people who have at least a bachelor's degree or the equivalent. And then additional 20,000 for people who've done master's degrees in the U.S. So the first they run the 20,000, and if you weren't selected, then you're put into the general lottery, and they rerun that. And there's some exceptions. If you work for university, there's no cap, but this is generally for corporations.
So when people are submitting for this, for an H-1B, do they already have a job lined up that they're
it's
aiming
the
for?
entity that applies. It's the employer.
Oh, okay. That's good because that kind of leads. Felicia, we can jump around a little bit because I'll just jump to this since it's one of our questions. We work with a lot of independent schools. I know you do as well, and I've seen this topic come up on school message boards. We've even had some school clients of ours ask us about it, ask what the process is. So, hiring a teacher, for example, who's not a U.S. citizen, and the first thing that I've heard schools say to other schools saying, "What do I do?" is 100% hire a competent immigration attorney right away. So why is that?
So there are a couple of different options for teachers. I work with a number of schools. Actually, I met Lisa, was at a conference for schools.
Right.
And it's one of the things I enjoy doing. On our website says that I run our pro bono and nonprofit. It's true. I focus. Being the managing partner, I can spend time, focus on pro bono work and spend time working on low bono and education nonprofit because I like to give back in that way. We charge a discounted rate, mostly for schools. I'll cut my rate by 50%. So essentially, the school has a number of options. There's the J visa, which is a visa that focuses It's basically a cultural exchange visa. It's run by the Department of State. So applications are made to sponsors. Those are entities that have licenses from the Department of State. So it's a very quick visa. There's an R visa for religious schools. Sometimes they bring in priest, a nun, a rabbi to come and teach, especially religious subjects. And then there's the H-1B. The downside of the H-1B is that it only begins on October 1. So for a school that's starting on August 29th or September 1st, whatever date, right after Labor Day, there's a month where that teacher won't be able to work on the H-1B.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why it's the least preferable in our view because of that. At the same time, we've been trying to work with some universities to put together some sort of research program where teachers could start to do research. And if they're working in an H-1B capacity for a university, there's no cap. So they could start even earlier. So if they're willing to spend 5 hours a week doing research at a university, then they could teach starting September 1st without a problem. So but the problem is you have to find the university. You have to make this, there's no benefit in doing things fraudulently. So it has to be something where there's a real need.
So if schools have someone that they want to hire, is there a different method than the H-1B visa?
So as I said, we did a visa once for someone who's teaching biolab at a university at night, twice a week, and that allowed him to start working earlier. And
that's what it is. Okay, it's the research. It's
so it's like research or doing something in the university as an employee. Once you have an H-1B, then you can have H-1Bs for multiple employees.
Do you ever see independent schools do something like that, or is it just university and colleges at this point?
So university and colleges are allowed to because there's a specific carve out for universities that they're not subject to that cap of 65,000.
Got it.
And so once you're working, then no longer subject, you can then work. But most of the schools that I've worked with have done the J visa. The J visa is this really fantastic visa that allows them to come for up to 5 years. Generally, It starts at 3 years and goes. The intent is the person is going to go back to their home country and share what they learned in the U.S. In my time that I've been practicing, we've actually seen a requirement now that they have to work with the principal of their school abroad to do some inter-country learning. So they'll maybe do something where the schools will have a Zoom call with the different students or some sort of programming because the idea here is to have intercultural exchange. We want to bring in the viewpoint of a teacher, maybe teaching Spanish who is from Spain, or someone who's teaching about history of the classics who was from Greece. I mean, these are things that would enrich our students, and so that's the intent of the J visa. One of the benefits of the J visa is the spouse is work authorized, and so it's a great deal to come in and do that. And as I said, if the sponsor allows for it, then you can do up to 5 years, which is a substantial amount of time.
How long would it take for the person getting that J visa to get it and get accepted? So from the time they get the job offer, basically, to the time that they get the visa, like how much time does that normally take?
So truthfully, it can be done in a matter of weeks. The way the sponsors work is that the application is made not to the government, but to the sponsor, right? They have a license from the Department of State. That application takes 3 weeks maybe, and part of that is also an interview, where they'll do a Zoom interview with a person in their home country. Once that's been approved, then they send it by FedEx. It's still old school. They send by FedEx this, it's called the DS 2019. That goes to the person, and then they make an application at their local consulate to get a visa to come to the U.S. During COVID, at the end of COVID, they made it a priority. They prioritized the J visas over others, J's and F's, the students, because they realized that they have to be here on a certain date. You know, in a company, you start a month later, all right, it may, inconvenience some new project, but schools have very rigid start dates. And so therefore they do prioritize it. When we make applications, we usually get a quick interview. That'll take another 2 weeks or so. And so you're talking about 6 weeks. If everything is lined up, maybe even shorter, but you can have 6 weeks so the person can have their visa to come to the U.S.
So tell us some of the issues you've seen crop up. We'll just stay on independent schools as an example, since we both got mutual clients in that industry and we work with them often. What are the issues that you've seen doing, whether it's H-1B or the J visa, with schools that maybe they think, hey, I could kind of go through this process myself?
Certainly. The J visa is very helpful. Because they're multiple sponsors, sometimes you have to find the right sponsor for the right school. The sponsors do run out of numbers. They have a number of licenses they can use. Another issue we sometimes come up is that they don't want them to leave after the 3 or 5 years. And so how do we deal with that? We have this fantastic teacher. They're coming in for a cultural exchange. There are some J visas that are, if there's government funding involved, they have a 2-year home residency requirement. So that means that after they finish their time in the U.S., if they don't return back to their home country for 2 years, and home country, they can't go to a third country, but the home country for 2 full years, they can't return to the U.S. to make an application for a certain number of visa types or to apply for a green card. We do a lot of PERMs, which is where we test labor market to see if this person, so when we're applying for a green card, one of the ways of doing so is to say, listen, we have this person who does a fantastic job in this specific area, and their specific skills are unique, and so we want to hire them. For example, we do this for Hebrew instructors often, because there just aren't many people who are licensed or who have experience teaching Hebrew language. And so we'll test the labor market, we'll put out and see if there's anyone, and we don't receive, this is mostly for schools, let's say
When you say you test the labor market,
yeah,
you're testing the labor market, like
where you are,
so geographic region that you're
yeah,
working.
it's limited to your area. So what we would do is first we put in a request for prevailing wage. We say this person has these credentials, this is experience, what would be the correct wage, and then we would put out ads, and we would hold essentially interviews to see if there are people who could do the job. And if we don't find anybody, then we submit to the Department of Labor our recruitment record, or the company does, and then if the response is, yeah, the recruitment was done correctly and you didn't find anybody, then the company can make an application for a green card. And one of the biggest issues we're dealing with right now is we're still feeling the consequences of COVID. Right now, it used to be, I could tell you, it was 6 weeks to 3 months was the prevailing wage determination, and 3 to 5 months for the reviewing the recruitment. Now, I was speaking to somebody we work with, my partner Rebecca, about this. It's a minimum of 6 months for the prevailing wage determination. Then we start the recruitment, which takes 60 days. And then we're seeing 12 months on the review of the recruitment record.
So this is something that schools would have to start pretty early.
That's what we're telling people. So
Far in
this
advance,
needs to begin really a lot earlier than we used to do. We tell our companies, we used to start in the 4th year of the 6 years of their H-1B. Now we need to start at the end of the 3rd year if we're going to make it by the end of the time.
Interesting. So it sounds like, too, just what I'm thinking about as you're talking, you guys are essentially a pretty effective liaison between the schools and the agencies in order to facilitate all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And as things come up, we can also help to figure out if we need to pivot to a different visa type.
Got it. Okay.
So that's
Can you bounce from one visa type to another without it causing too many issues, or at least depending on the situation? Are you able to do that?
So you certainly can. For some of our religious schools, the person will come in initially, let's say on a J visa, and after the 5th year, though, they want them to stay. They might do a religious worker visa and then have them stay. That only gives you another 5 years.
So religious schools can do religious worker visas?
Correct. And that was, it's either for clergy or for religious occupations. So they have to be teaching religious subjects. They have to be, you don't have to be ordained per se. You can be a lay person, but you have to have experience to be able to say, and you need to be a member of that, of whatever denomination that is for at least 2 years prior to making that application.
I see.
You can volunteer.
You can't be Catholic and then say, oh, you know what? I think I'm actually going to teach Hebrew now.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in a Catholic school, you certainly could. But in the lifetime of an employee, not necessarily at a school, but we might switch from visa type to visa type. For example, an L visa can be valid for 5 years. A certain L1B is only valid for a total of 5 years. We might then try to switch to an H1B, give that person a 6th year. And then at the end of the H1B, we might try to get them an O visa, which is individual extraordinary ability, based upon what they've done for the company. They may have written some articles. And so, that will give them, there's no limitation on the O visa. So we've maxed out our 5 years on an L1B. We hit 6 years on the H1B and then go to the O if they haven't met the criteria. So really it's about using all the different tools in our tool belt to, accomplish what the company or school require.
Well, I'll tell you, there's already way more visas than I knew existed.
There's a whole alphabet.
So if I had to do this, I would definitely be talking to somebody who knows about those.
I'm just curious about the O visa. You said is for like extraordinary contributions. So who determines if these contributions are extraordinary or not?
So that's a good question. So the U.S. immigration system is all individuals, right? It's a bureaucracy. We submit documents to a lockbox or to, in the case of an O, to a service center. And then you have someone who reviews it. And there are very defined rules for it. So, for example, an O visa is divided into 2 parts. There's an O1A and an O1B. So an O1A is individuals who are extraordinary. That's the O, ordinary, extraordinary.
Right.
Those people are generally, scholars, people who are extraordinary in business and in athletics. That's the O1A. The O1B is divided into 2 parts as well. That's for people who are singers, who are, I once did someone for an off-Broadway show. It was very exciting because then they gave me tickets and I went to the off-Broadway show to see them actually perform.
Like a theatrical performance.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's the O1B is on the artistic side. And essentially what it is, if you haven't won a Nobel Peace Prize or you haven't won,
it's not a long list.
It's a short list. I tell my clients that you haven't won it yet.
There you go. But when you do, we'll do that visa.
Yet.
Exactly. But so that if you haven't won an internationally recognized prize, and we actually just had a client of ours just won the Latin Emmys, and it was like a wonderful thing because now we have this internationally recognized prize that we can utilize. But if not, then there are 8 criteria. You need to be 3 of them. So a high salary as compared to others in your field, published works, maybe something that's been adopted widely in the field, being a key employee at a company with a distinguished reputation. On the art side, that might be, being the lead in a off-Broadway or, in Les Mis in London would be something that's recognized. How much money did that bring in versus salary, because clearly these are different things. And so there are these criteria you need to meet. And for the OVs, you really need to meet the criteria. I don't need to exceed. I just need to meet these criteria. When it comes to the EB1A, which is the equivalent green card of that, you need to exceed it, and it has to be something that's continuous and recognized. So you're not going to get that, that green card based on it unless you can show those additional criteria or that you've really are the top percent. We got a green card for I think he was number 2 at the time, number 2 ranked Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter. I don't know what the term is.
I was going to ask you about that next, sport, because I was thinking about that with sports.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Probably a common thing.
And that's what I was mentioning earlier. I told you is that I started in corporate law where it was a lot of document review, but here every day the law is the same, but the underlying case changes. So one day I'll be working with the spouse of getting a citizenship for the spouse of the managing director of a large consulting firm. That's a basic family. The next day I'm talking to a company that's on the cutting edge of cybersecurity. I mean, really the cutting edge. The next day, I'm talking to somebody who performs, maybe we did installation art. I remember he sent me pictures from Burning Man, from his installation he did there. Like, just every day is a different
It sounds like
thing.
You could get some pretty decent tickets with this line of work.
Yeah, you have some good connections.
So I wish. I haven't tried yet. We did represent an occupational therapist on a championship-winning NBA team.
Wow.
And I've also represented the children of, I mean, if I could say their names, you would recognize them instantly, but people
That's all
who
right.
are,
Yeah.
who
We
are,
understand there's confidentiality
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But I mean,
The children of somebody
children
that
of
you
people
would know.
you'd certainly recognize. I mean, these are people who are in halls of fame and the like. And so it's, but I said it's an honor. It's a responsibility. It's an honor to be able to be given this responsibility to represent them, be their advocate in this process and help them along to the end of it.
Yeah. Well, so that brings me to my next question, Ari, just because thinking about it, I mean, I-9 immigration attorney, that's so specific and so unique. And so how did you kind of go from corporate lawyer, like you mentioned, into this more niche specialty?
A lot of it was timing. When I was in law school, I was in a path to be in an area of administrative law. Administrative law is where you're dealing with the government. They're the other side of you. And I decided in the end, the timing was off because I'd gone a semester abroad. I came back. I would have had to stick around for 6 months and then restart the program. And I said, all right, I'm not going to do it. But I already had that feeling of administrative law. Like I knew I liked the idea of dealing with a set area of law, with a set area of regulations and a set, you're very, it's kind of like a walled garden. It's exactly what you're dealing with. You know exactly what it is. There's 5 books on the subject and you learn it and you keep up on the things that change, but that's your basis. After corporate, I ended up being in-house counsel somewhere, and then really through this thing, they call it, as an Israeli person who came to me, is a chok hasavta, which means the law of grandparents or of grandma, is that if you're the child of a U.S. citizen, but they haven't lived in the U.S. sufficient amount of time, you can use the grandparents' time in the U.S. to meet the residency requirement.
Okay.
So you have people from all over the world. We filed one just the other day from someone from living in London, but they're Italian, where their mother, so in this case, right, so this person's mother lived in the U.S., she went to college in the U.S., and then she basically left the United States. Her daughter was born, she was able to transmit citizenship to her daughter, and then now her daughter had a baby, and she never lived in the U.S., but she's a U.S. citizen. You can utilize the residence of the grandparent to meet the criteria to apply for citizenship.
Wow.
So a relative of my wife came to me and said, hey, can you help us out with this? And I started doing it. And we did it for them. And then I met president of a company that helped people with the diversity visa lottery, which is in the U.S. every year. There's a lottery that runs. You enter in October, November time. And then in May they come out with who won. And it's basically 50,000 people from around the world in the reverse amount. Like, so for example, if the UK, let's take another country. If you're from a country with very low immigration, then there are a lot of available slots. If you're from a country, let's say Japan, which has a higher amount of immigration, there are fewer spots. And basically, we give out 50,000 green cards every year based upon a lottery, just diversity, because we want to increase the diversity of the United States. So I met him, this person, and we started talking, and I basically started assisting the winners in their process, and we went from there. And then I expanded outward. And family, one of my first client was a friend of mine from college. And then just, you move on. And now we've represented people in, I think between myself and my partner, we've over 100 countries.
I was going to ask something about that because it sounds like it's pretty heavy on the international side. Where did you study abroad?
I did a semester at Tel Aviv University. So I was at Boston University. And then they had this program, and I really was very interested in this, and we did a semester abroad. And it was wonderful because it was really interesting to see. I didn't speak Hebrew at the time, and so I was taking a lot of classes with international professors who were coming in to teach. So I took classes in the business school, and it was really interesting to be in a really international environment because one person was from Germany, another person from the UK, and they were all coming to participate in an international program.
We were talking about the hundreds-year-old history in New England before when you got here, but it's thousands of years of history over in Israel and that part of the world. So did that spark your interest in the international field that you're in a little bit? So
I always had a connection to the international world. So I'm very lucky I was able to take my kids to Greece and see.
Oh, that's great. I've wanted to go there.
Yeah, I went to. It was just unbelievable. This is
exactly,
democracy.
Yeah.
It was great to see. It was a real honor. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful place. Not that I've been, but
Okay.
the pictures that I've seen.
It is the blue of the ocean is just unbelievable. We were in
Did you
Athens.
hop around to any of the islands, or were you doing
So it
the
was-
main sites?
So it was a cruise.
Oh, that's funny. I always think that would be a good way to do it, because then you're doing the traveling while you sleep.
Exactly. Yeah, I've never been. This is my first time on a cruise. We're very lucky. My in-laws
That's a good first cruise.
took us away, and so we were able to go
Yeah.
there. But it was wonderful. We were in Santorini, and last day was in Athens, and it was wonderful to see roads. This is unbelievable.
Yeah,
Something totally unique.
on something like that, you get to hit all the top. I always think, like, when the first time you're visiting a foreign country, you want to hit those main tourist sites.
Yeah.
So then the next time you go, you can kind of like get more in the culture. I studied abroad in Rome.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't. There's a lot of things that you would go to when you're in Rome that I didn't go to. I went to like very obscure things.
Okay.
And we were in college, so we did like. We weren't completely focused on going
I hear.
and looking
I
at the
understand.
historic sites, but we had some good classes that brought us around to
Right.
to those types of things. But it's funny. I was thinking when you were saying bringing the international teachers to teach certain subjects,
Mm-hmm.
and that can kind of like enrich the experience a little bit. But when I was in Rome, every one of my teachers was either from England or America.
Really?
I didn't have any Italian teachers.
Well, that's
So they were doing the reverse process over there.
well, I think a lot of it probably
Yeah.
the program. They needed people who spoke English because.
That's a good point.
Yes.
Well, so I mean, I have a few questions regarding the I-9. So one thing that that we see a lot of with our clients and both internally. So we have both an I-9, obviously, that we do for our employees, but then we also have E-Verify, which is slightly similar but different.
Yes.
So can you talk about that and how and those differences?
Certainly. So the I-9 and E-Verify are two separate systems, but if you're participating in the E-Verify system, it actually changes how you deal with your I-9. For example, you need to get a document, if you're using what's called a Schedule B, the second list of documents, you need to use one that has a picture on it. You also need to get a social security number because that has to be uploaded to E-Verify. So E-Verify was a system, I don't remember when it was put into process, but today we're seeing E-Verify used in basically 3 or 4 types of companies. So if a company is applying for a government contract, I think they're required in most cases to utilize E-Verify. If you've been caught doing something wrong, part of the punishment is you'll now start using E-Verify. If you have,
If the employer,
if the employer, had an audit and they found
regardless of state.
yeah, so E-Verify is federal, doesn't make a difference.
Oh, I thought that, but some states require.
Some states do require E-Verify in specific situations. There was a law they were putting in, they attempted to pass, it didn't pass, where it said that employers of a certain size were required to do E-Verify.
Okay.
And they would phase it in, but employers under 50 wouldn't have to do E-Verify. So there are many different types of attempting to get this, to get more companies to utilize E-Verify. A company may choose to use E-Verify if they want to utilize the good faith defense. They say, listen, we signed up for E-Verify, we weren't required to, because we want to make sure that we meet the criteria. And the last type of company that might use E-Verify is when you finish college, if I'm a foreigner, non-U.S. citizen, I do college in the U.S., I get 1 year of what's called OPT, optional professional training. If it's in the STEM and the company is E-Verify, I now get 2 more years of that. So I get 3 years. And so that's important for a number of reasons. One is, so we have a lot of clients who, through us, have signed up for E-Verify because they want to take advantage of, hiring this computer programmer, this statistician, this economist for, a number of years. So 3 years. That also gives you 3 bites at the H-1B apple. Because if you're not selected in year 1, well, we'll try again for year 2. And then you get year 3. So it's a great way not only to utilize the maximum amount of time for the employee, but also it gives you more chances.
So do you typically recommend that regardless of what state you're in, you should use E-Verify?
So I don't recommend taking on any additional administrative burdens, generally, outright. Like I wouldn't say don't do it if you don't have to. But if there's a reason, such as the OPT extension, then I would say definitely do it because the value add is substantial.
I was even thinking when you said the ability to utilize a good faith defense, it seems like maybe that could cover you a little bit if you just utilize E-Verify more.
So if you're using E-Verify, generally, though, you are a little bit more, so I'm looking for here, let's start again. If you are utilizing the E-Verify system and it's because you chose to, then it's very clear that you are doing your due diligence or
Right.
just, complying with the rules. So usually it's not something that we're very concerned about, but it's if you want to, cross the T's, dot the I's, make sure E-Verify is very helpful. One of the downsides
Kind of forces you to.
exactly,
Yeah.
because you have to
Especially
upload.
to do it on time, too.
Yes.
Make sure that you do it on time.
Yeah, the recording the date of start is the big issue that everyone seems to have when we do audits. Is they always
Wow.
leave that one piece, and that's a very important piece of information because it defines the time frame for when they started and when they end. It's an important.
Why would
piece.
that be an issue? This seems like so elementary.
Because people leave things out. They forget to sign the document. It has to be
Yes.
signed by two people, and you will have signatures missing. And so on the I-9, let's go to E-Verify. I'll come back on the E-Verify system. If you don't upload the information, it doesn't let you proceed. And then once
Foolproof.
you
That would be my. That's why I would do it.
And then once you upload the document or once you upload the information, if there's a no match, I mean, the person's name doesn't match the security number, that's going to come back, and that can stall things, especially when it's an innocent issue, whatever it is. But sometimes just I put the number in wrong. But sometimes it requires a little bit more effort to clear up that letter. You can't hire the person. That person cannot be employed while you're clarifying this issue. On the I-9 side, though, so if I make an error, so there are errors that are just paperwork errors, and those are the ones that are usually they'll come back and say fix them, or those are easily fixed, right? If I didn't put in person's middle name, or I forgot to put in a number or a date, or I didn't define the document extremely clearly, right? Like I called the U.S. passport, so I said USP, and I put the number, whatever it is. That might be at work. But then there are more substantial errors, right? And that, for example, not including the date the person started, is a more substantial error because that really defines from when that error occurred.
Yeah, it sounds like a simple piece of information, but like you said, it can have ripple effects throughout the whole process. I think it would be good if we kind of do like a rapid fire. Like, what are the most common we already touched on some. You can repeat them too, but the most common I-9 errors and pitfalls. Like, these are the things that you see a lot that companies doing the I-9 wouldn't necessarily think that would be the issue. They're thinking something more complex, but it sounds like they can be simple too.
So generally, the ones that the errors that we see are if the employee doesn't understand what they have to put in information, they may just put their name, and then that's it. They really need to complete the entirety of the section. Then the employer who reviews the document really has to look that out. They also should give a copy of and this is not something you record, like no one sees this, but you should give a copy of the instructions to the employee. The I-9 comes in Spanish, but you're not allowed to use it. It's the strangest thing. Only in Puerto Rico can it be used in Spanish. But you can give a Spanish instructions to the employee if that'll help them to complete it.
Wow, why is that?
That is an odd little.
Welcome to the U.S. government.
Yeah. So what would the solution be for that? It seems like it would be common.
So
we even have our employee app, for example. There's an option to change it to Spanish just because we had that ask from a lot of our clients. Hospitality industry, for example, they're saying we need to have this payroll information in Spanish. So they can't even fill out their I-9 in Spanish.
So you can assist them in doing it, but then you have to record yourself as an interpreter on the document itself, on that extra page. But you have to make sure that you're not filling it out
For them.
with them. I mean, in theory, you could fill out the information if you have the form, but you really should let them fill it out or assist them in that process. Another one is that the employer just doesn't sign the document because they just look through they'll photocopy, the passport, the photocopy, the Social Security card, and the I-94 card or whatever, and the foreign passport. And they'll just forget to complete out what the document is. They're like, oh, I photocopied, I'll just attach it to the back. But you need to actually define the information, put it down, record that information on the form itself, and sign it and date it, and have the date of start. And these dates are different, right? Because you have up to 4 days. And so that's an issue. A big problem we see is losing the I-9s, is not keeping them in the right place. Or if I photocopy the documentation of one, it's not required. But once I do it for one, I have to do it for all. Mm-hmm. And so that's also inconsistent.
You couldn't say, I've got electronic files for one group, and then I've also got a file folder full of them up behind my desk.
No, but I'm saying, like, for example, let's say you photocopy the passport and attach it to the back of the I-9. Once you do it once, every employee who gives you documents to review, because you're looking at the documents saying, oh, is this a valid social security card? Is this a valid passport? Is this a valid student ID or license? You need to then photocopy everybody's.
Consistency in record keeping, they have to do. Okay.
Yeah. Now, electronic record keeping, there are systems. There are a number of companies that provide systems where they can fill everything online. That's allowable. However, there are specific requirements for electronic record keeping. Some people scan them in, but you need to have a catalog and be able to show an index where you can see all this information. So if, let's say I say, oh, I just put it into a folder on my computer, all right, it has to be secure because you have social security numbers there. It has to be something that only this person has access to. So if I'm putting it on, only the individual, the HR, whoever is responsible for this, should have access to this. And they will check that. They want to know who has access. If it's just sitting on your folders and anyone can access it, that's a major problem.
Felicia, you're HR. Where are our I-9s?
In a locked drawer.
There you go.
There you
I
go.
keep
That's
them
the right
all
answer.
in paper.
But even though as a company we sell software that people can do it, keep it entirely in a secure document center.
Yeah.
It's funny. Sometimes the old methods are a good
Yes.
safeguard also.
I am so old fashioned in that sense. So from my days of teaching where I had every student file like in a drawer in my desk, moving into HR, it was like, this needs to be the same. So I have every person's name in a drawer. I-9s are obviously separate.
Yeah, very good. Very good. This is impressive.
But that's how I keep everything organized. Everything is on paper, unless, of course, people have given me digital documents, which isn't relevant to I-9. But yeah, no, that's how we do it. We're very secure.
Do you typically see that? Can people keep electronic versions and the hard copies?
We don't usually sit. I mean, you could. You wouldn't have someone fill out two I-9s, but if you were scanning them and you were going to make sure it's in a secure location and there's an index of all the I-9s and you can meet all those criteria, then yeah, you can have it on your computers. That way you can quickly send it to the attorney for audit or whatnot. At the same time, when we correct I-9s, so it's the way of correcting an I-9 is there are a number of different ways of doing it. You can do a new I-9, attaching it to the back of the old one. You could put, you can't white out things. This is a federal document. Anyone who touches it has to be recorded as touching this document. I mean, not physically, but you know what I'm saying, if you're somebody writing something. So for example, if let's say we were to go through the I-9 and we realized, oh my gosh, we're missing the start date. So one way to fix it is to use a different colored pen than the rest of the document, fill in the date, and then put a little Post-it next to it saying, on this day, we reviewed the I-9, realized that there was an error, and we've corrected it and signed the name of by this person, signed the name. So therefore, it's not, the I-9 is still delinquent in some way, but we've done what we can to correct it. And if it's reviewed, usually that's forgiven because
like a good faith effort.
Exactly. And so there's also if there are fines, then a good faith defense would give you 5%. Usually they'd reduce it by 5% if you tried to do the right thing.
Oh, okay.
Previously or even during the time period. So let's talk about audits because I think this might give someone an idea of exactly what happens. But, you'd have two people show up and they'd hand you a notice of intent to inspect. Right? Used to be they also give you a subpoena.
Well, you know what? I was thinking, though, before you get into like the detail, how you were going to ask about how they're triggered, right?
Yeah. So I did do a little research before this, and I read that most of the time I-9 audits are triggered by basically like a person complaining or putting in a statement to, Department of Homeland Security or Immigrations. Do you find that that's actually the most common cause, or do you not know?
We'll never know, right? They don't tell us. And I was like, so why are you guys here? They're going to say, because we can be. They're not going to give us any type of reasoning. That's what we believe to be the case, is generally there's a complaint. I think, though, that we have at least one time in the past where it was a government contractor with only two people in it, and I think they predated the E-Verify requirements, and I think that they were doing it because they were a government contractor, right, who wasn't E-Verify.
Right.
And so, I don't know why it occurs. I think there are some industries that might be more, maybe farming or,
they could have be under a little bit of a microscope.
Scrutiny. Exactly.
Yeah.
And we had an IT company where they showed up. It was 48 employees, and it was very strange because why would what would, and most likely it was probably someone who got fired or whatever it was and was upset and, filed. That's what we believe, but there's no way for us to really know. That's
Right.
So when those audits come up, what happens? These people just walk in and say, "Hey, we're looking at your I-9 documents."
So
They pick up the phone and they call Ari, and then what happens next?
That's number 2 on the list. So it used to be they would show up and they're like, "All right, we're taking all your I-9s now," and you would say, "Hold on." You call Ari, and Ari says, "No, you have 3 days. Tell them come back in 3 days, and we'll give you the documents."
Good to know.
Very, yeah.
So now, though, they do is they usually will drop off this notice of intent to inspect, and it's usually not an officer at that time. It's just someone else, a contractor, and then we'll contact them and say you have 3 days to provide the documents. And now we either FedEx it or in one case we did email. Which was
Well,
very
you like
strange.
FedEx.
FedEx is it's a
You're
part of
used to
my business.
FedEx.
Do you
Yeah.
ever
Yes.
use UPS?
I don't use UPS. I do use USPS though. As a complete aside, you can cut this out if you want later on, but we found that people would steal FedExes when we send them to people's homes. Like it would just get, porch pirates.
Yeah.
And so we've moved over and we send documents to individuals. We only send it through USPS in a 6x10 format, priority mail, because that actually fits inside their mailbox.
Oh.
And so this was like our way of like dealing with this issue for our clients. It's a silly thing, but it's those little little changes that really.
Yeah, you wouldn't think of that, but
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the I-9s. So essentially, though, that in that 3-day period, you can also request a little more time. Depends on the officer. Sometimes they'll give you 10 days to respond. If they ask for additional documentation, they're always going to ask for additional because they need to know the employees, right? So we need an employee register, right? Because if you have 102 employees and you have 14 I-9s, right? If you just hand over the I-9s, they won't know how many you're missing. So they get that. They want historical records to see when a person was terminated or left, because that'll define when you no longer had a responsibility to provide the I-9. And so technically, you don't have to provide those in 3 days. The I-9s have to be within 3 days. But if we ask for an extension, generally we get 10 days. But again, it's really dependent upon the officer. And then we spend time educating. We do an audit, and we spend time educating the HR person or whoever's responsible. Some companies, it's the same person who's HR who also does, orders lunch for meetings. Like it's not a separate position in the company.
I do both of those things.
Yeah, you do that. Yeah.
Deserves a raise. So in those cases, we'll educate them. We'll go through them. We'll point out what the issues are. Sometimes they're missing supporting documents. Sometimes the people aren't available. Right, the person who left a year ago, we have no way of getting that. We have to just say, okay, we don't have it. And if you do a good enough job, it's not always the case, but we've gotten warning letters say, hey, it's all correct. You can't get these 2 people because they have already left. And so we understand that, and so we reserve the right to come back and check again in the future, and that's how it ends. Sometimes
So people hopefully have some time then to get their ducks in a row and know,
Exactly.
hey, I don't want them coming back.
mean,
And
that's
if they
what
do, I'm going to be ready.
Well, no, we'll be a lot of training. And that's what we're going to do is focus on training to make sure that this stuff never happens again.
Hey, that's great. You were talking about that before, though, the training, and so before we were online, some of the industries that you work with and training that you've done specific to. Industry specific. It all depends. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So I-9s are really universal. Like there's no difference in the industry, but clearly there are some companies. I was just doing consulting for a manufacturing facility. They have 500 plus employees, and they're seeing a very high turnover in there. And so therefore, there was a lot of training that went in there because they needed systems in place. While let's say a smaller company with 45 employees, where they really, you might have 1 new member over a period of time or 2 people leave. So therefore, there'll be different. We can tailor the training to the specifics of the industry and the specifics of the type of company, because again, those companies are different in the way they deal with things.
So when you're doing these trainings, who you're looking at? Obviously, the HR team, maybe the owners of the company, the executive team. Like everybody, managers need to know.
So generally, it's not. Usually, it's 1 executive or 1 person of a higher level, and then usually whoever's responsible for HR. Maybe it'll be 2 people, especially if we're doing an audit where we find detecting those errors and trying to get everything in place. Yeah. Another time that we do some work is I remember we worked with a company where they were being purchased. There was a merger, essentially, an acquisition of this company. And so depending on how the acquisition went down would define how you dealt with the I-9s. So for example, if we're acquiring the assets and all the employees are going to be let go and then rehired, then you would do new I-9s. But if they're taking over the company lock, stock, and barrel, share purchase agreement, then you would have to correct it. And there is some people who say that on the date of closing, if you do all new I-9s, you cut off all previous liability. That's been, because here we are, we're a new company, new owners. We're walking in, we did brand new I-9s, we're trying to fix it. But to that, aside on this, is that the date of the I-9 is so important because it needs to be the correct edition for the timing that you're doing. You can't just go back and download an old edition.
Yeah. Well, when you were talking about the common errors with them, where sometimes there's just people who don't have them, how do you to that point, how do you correct those? Especially, whether the employee is still here or whether they've left. Is there anything you can do good faith effort that you can make?
So the first thing to do is, and this is the most important thing with I-9s, besides filling out, once you're retaining the document, the most important thing is to create a list of the I-9s that need to be removed, right? Because you only have that 3 or 1 year, right, requirement. So let's say you had an employee who worked for 4 years and now it's the first anniversary of their termination. That I-9 should no longer exist in your files, right? So any error that's on there no longer exists because you're no longer required to hold on to that document.
You say no longer. Do you need to get rid of that?
You don't need to. You can have the papers.
Because there are some HR documents that you need to get.
Yeah.
You can't hold on to them for more than 2 years, right?
So
there's certain things you're not supposed to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, it's not a question of need or want. It's just a matter of you're not required
Okay.
to maintain that record. And so, as soon as someone is terminated, we take their I-9 out of the file from where they are and put it into a separate file where you check every first of the month which I-9s can be removed. Because if there is an error, not saying that there is an error, but if there is an error, then you don't have to deal with it anymore. It's moved on. And then when it comes to people who are, in the company, depending on the errors or what the issue is, we might fill out a brand new I-9 for the person. To say, come into the office tomorrow, bring, here's the list. I can't tell you to bring your passport. Here's the list of documents you could bring. Pick any single document from list 1 or one from B and one from C. Bring them in and we just have to complete this and put it in the file and say, we searched our files. We could not find the I-9 for this individual. Therefore, we had them completed. And on the bottom, though, where it says, that date of start, you have that original date of start, 2021, whatever that is. That date is there, So you're saying, it's signed today. It's going to have that start date, and you're admitting, saying we messed up. But look, we fixed it. We've done what we could. We couldn't find the I-9. We can't confirm. We don't know who was doing HR at the time. We can't confirm there was an I-9 at the time, but we can't find it in our records. Let's assume it was lost, and here we now have a new I-9 for you.
Got it. Let's switch gears a little bit. Ari, when you first got here this morning, we were walking through the office, giving you a little tour, and you asked how many employees we have in the office. And I think, Felicia, you always say, we've got maybe 75 employees total, but you always say we've got about 1/3 here all the time, 1/3 hybrid, and 1/3 fully remote. And I think we're in a similar boat to a lot of companies with, of course, remote work. Mm-hmm. And that's exploded, of course, for different reasons. But we all know the big one in the past couple of years that really hastened that. So how has remote work changed the I-9 process, and what do you see for developments and what might be on the horizon for that?
So clearly, the problem with the I-9 is that you really do need to inspect the documents. It has to be an original inspection. I can't just email you a copy of my passport. During COVID, there were certain allowances that were made.
Little lax, yeah.
No, they said you can send the documents, but when that restriction ended, you then had to come into the office and bring the original document and show it. Mm-hmm. So it just was a matter of catching up in time. But if you have employees who, let's say, do hybrid, where they're in the office 3 days a week or 2 days a week, then that doesn't change anything. It means that they still, the first day of employment, they have to complete section 1. The employer has to complete the second section and inspect it by Thursday of that week. If the person is fully remote, which is more of the issue, right, then how do you inspect the documents? Mm-hmm. So you can appoint someone, a CPA, usually we suggest is find an accountant, who can inspect the documents, record the information, photocopy, and then send the original to you to maintain in the office. That would be your, the way to deal with it.
One way that we deal with it is, we have done that. We did have an attorney one time review the I-9 documents and send us the verification. So we have done that before, but usually what we do as a company is we have the people come in for their first couple days of employment, no matter where they're from, just so the I-9, of course, can be completed, but then also it just gives them that chance to meet everybody, come into the office,
Yeah.
put names to faces, and it's just a nice welcome, I think, to kind of be part of the culture and be welcomed into the company.
So I think it's the right way to do things. We have our firm is, I think they call it. I heard that term, location agnostic. Like, I don't know that means I don't believe in locations, but I think it's it's that we work from anywhere and everywhere. One of my partners was in Panama for a few weeks, and that's fine. We built it, the technology to do that, but there definitely is something about being in the office and having that camaraderie. I heard a VC guy talk about how he, in their company, they've went hybrid. Everyone works from home, and instead, once a month, they go away for the weekend. Everyone together. I'm like, I can't afford to take an entire company away for the weekend every month just to make up for the fact that we pay less in rent. But I guess if you're in Silicon Valley, you're probably making money on that.
Well, yeah, it depends where you take them too, I guess.
That's also true.
Some people go to Hawaii for a week, but you could say, hey, you know what? We're gonna meet at the restaurant.
Yes, I
For
think
just one night. Yeah.
I don't know. We've been talking about going to Hawaii instead of having a Christmas party. Remember we were talking about
Oh,
that?
have we? No, we're not doing that.
We talked about that last year.
But yeah, I think there's definitely things you can do. So do you have a physical office?
so. We have a physical office. We do. It's big enough to hold our entire team, and we do get together. We have some people who work in the office, some people who don't.
Yep.
But the type of law that we practice really is. Before COVID, I'd say I met 10, 15% of my clients. Now, I mean, everything is Zoom. I think this is the way that everyone is doing it. And so, we try to pass that savings along to our clients because now we don't need to have a fancy office in Manhattan. We're paying a lot more in rent just to, or even traveling time.
Because they don't know if when you're doing Zoom, they don't know if you're in the fancy office in Manhattan or you're in your living room.
I mean, it's certainly true. Yeah. Wearing pants, I guess, is the other.
But I mean, it's funny. People in our office, they'll be like they'll be in their basement, but they'll have like behind the screen they choose, it'll look like they're in a condo in Miami.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's like,
Or
I know that's not your basement.
Well, or what's always funny is our IT people, they have pictures of Checkwriters.
Okay.
So they have pictures of like different
Aerial
places
views.
of Checkwriters, and it just like looks like they're in their office. Like our CTO, it always looks like he's in his office because he has a picture of his office.
He does that because we give him a hard time if he's not here. So we don't know anymore if he's here.
Yeah, it's sneaky.
The telltale signs of the around the head moving.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But that reminds. It's funny, Ari, you were talking about how Zoom and meeting clients that way, but the reason you're here today is because you met one of our sales reps in person.
Yes.
And it's funny because we notice a lot. I mean, we noticed this before even the whole remote work exploded even more. But just the ability to go and meet people in person, shake their hand, talk to them face to face is, I think, and they'll tell you too, for our sales team in particular, this is a huge benefit. And similarly, like we love to have clients and partners visit us. I mean, you traveled up to where we're based in Massachusetts for had a 3-hour drive, and we really appreciate that because we love to host anyone here. But we've had clients fly in from the West Coast.
Yeah.
So how do you feel that impacts your business at all? It seems like you do try to get out there too to the different conferences and things.
I definitely do want to meet clients face to face. I mean, the truth is, depending on the company, for example, saw a new client up this morning. They're based outside the U.S., so their attorneys who I'm dealing with are outside. Even though they have substantial operations in the U.S., I'm dealing with that person who's in charge of international relocations based out of Rome, right? And that's where they are. I would love to get on a plane and meet them.
It's a business expense.
Certainly. Tell my accountant. But I think that at the same time, what I mentioned earlier is that a lot of what we do is relationships, right? Because we're trusted advisors for these people. And so we build that rapport. It definitely has changed, right? You used to get together to go out for dinner or, meet in the office. That happens less and less. So we definitely, the skill set, right, of maintaining that relationship has changed. You have to put more effort into it, I think. At the same time, I think, I'll put this, let me start again. The relationships are still, are stronger in a way, and we have to work harder on those relationships. The communication has always been an issue. Right? I don't like email. I think email is a very bad way of communication. There was a study that says like 93% of communication is nonverbal, right? It's your body, you're talking, the tone of your voice. All that's missing. So you have the 7% that's left. It's just the words.
Which is why you can send an email to somebody and they'll think, oh, wow, they're not
angry.
happy with me.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, no, I just didn't use an exclamation at the end. Come on, give me a break.
It's so funny you say that because whenever there's, issues that come up, because of course, being HR, I always, kind of get pulled into those things. That's always my first thing is I say, well, why don't you just go talk to the person? Why don't you just call them?
Yeah.
Why don't you, just go over and see them? And there's so many people who say, why do you always say that to me? Why can't I just put it in email? Then I'm able to think about it, which I totally understand that form of communication where you're able to like put your thoughts together and really think about it. But it's like, it can be so misconstrued by the time you finish writing it and then the person reads it and then they think about it. So I just think it's so funny because that's what I tell people here all the time. And they're always like, why do you always say that?
I love that though, because I had somebody last week who sent me a Zoom invite and I look at it and I think, I can literally see you across my you're physically in the building. Why don't we just meet in person in an
Was it
hour?
Jamie?
Certainly.
Was it Jamie who sent it to you?
No, it wasn't Jamie. No, Jamie's good with verbal. But that's a good point. There's so many ways, and it's almost like it's funny. Sometimes I think text is even more personal than email at this point because and not to mention the amount of emails people get. It's like sometimes you don't even look at it. It's kind of convenient though, because then I can say I just didn't look at it because I don't check them anymore.
Well, I mean, as an attorney, I don't get to do that.
No, you don't.
But I sometimes a lot of my responses to emails have been, initially I got on the craze of email and everyone's responding, and I get a list of 14 questions, and I respond to the questions, and then I get another email with 97 more questions.
Oh man, yeah. Let's just
parsing
talk.
out
Yeah.
every, and so usually what I'll do is when I start to see that progression, or if they say we have a new employee, I'll say, how about this? Let's jump on a call so I can answer your questions in real time.
Definitely.
As they come up. And if you want to send me the questions beforehand, so that way, because that's the flip side. A lot of people like the emails because it gives them the ability to set the agenda. I say, set the agenda, give me the questions, I'll answer them. But this way, if you have a follow-up question, we can dispose of it right away as opposed to, trying to parse out what he meant by using this word versus that word or the start date versus, and so that's why I'm a very big fan of phone calls and Zooms. And as I said, relationships take effort, right? It's not about just saying, "Oh, well, you're my client for 10 years," and it's about spending the time and talking and being there and explaining what they need. So I've become very not insistent, but I definitely make it as an option. I don't at the end of the email. A lot of people write like, if you have any questions, just email me, right? All right. If you have any questions, let's jump on a call. I always put that down because I think that is part of what they're paying for. We've gotten into a culture where it's email, and I think that when someone says, hey, let's talk, let's connect as humans, it comes off as something refreshing. Something different.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. Giving your cell phone out too. People don't want to do it, but it is.
So we're not going that far. But they have my direct line and it rings on my cell phone, so they don't have to worry.
There you go.
Well, and you have Dakota's cell phone number now, so you're good, right?
I did that. Well, if you're traveling up and it's an overnight thing, it's best practice.
Yeah. Of course, you've generally talked about a lot of the things that employers should be doing in terms of the I-9s, preparing for any visas that they're getting. But just for one single piece of advice for an employer, maybe it's the first time that they've ever hired a non-U.S. citizen in any aspect, whether that means that they're, a resident or they're going to be coming over from another country. What advice, one piece of advice would you have for them? And all of the things that you've shared with us, what's the one piece of advice you'd have?
I'll divide it into two parts. Legal advice would be just to recognize that you're entering a new world. And there are a lot of benefits. Once you do it once, it's a lot easier to do it again. Like we have clients who, they hired that one person who they found who was, we had a financial client where they found someone who specialized in a very specific type of mode of transportation, and they were about to make substantial investments. They wanted an analyst in that area. First time they brought that person over, and now they have 10 analysts because there was this
jumpstart.
They're scared of it. Like, what does this mean? But once they saw the value and they knew that they could do it, and there was a path to green card, they wouldn't lose them after 3 years. They knew that there was a way to do it. They knew that they had a partner in this. They were much more open. So don't be scared to do it. We can certainly do it with you. But on the practical side, again, I think there is a sensitivity that I hear from the HR staff that I work with. And again, it's because this is not just getting a job. This is their future in this country.
And
so,
like you were talking about before, if they're bringing family along, it's a whole nother piece too.
So there's a sensitivity that has to go into it that wouldn't exist because if you have an employee and it doesn't work out, right, they find another job, right? They're still located in the same town, they live in Boston, whatever it is. But here, there's a lot more that goes into it. And whether those fears are unfounded, like I've gotten calls or emails where there's one guy who was going for an interview at a consulate, and he sent me 31 questions about that he had researched on the internet, questions that had been asked on interviews and how he would respond to each question. And what was my thoughts on every one of his responses? And I'm like,
It's a long email.
It's a very long email. But at the same time, I completely understood where he was coming from. Like this is such it doesn't make a difference which country he's coming from, but clearly it was a country where this was such a substantial change in his lifestyle for his family. You know, they were going to go to school in the U.S. They were going to, and so of course, I sat down and I responded to every single one of them because, you know, you have to be sensitive. It's a different mentality because it's a different place. It's just something outside of what we, you know, I would say spoiled U.S. citizens, but we're U.S. citizens. We don't have to worry about that. We don't have to think about,
exactly,
you know, will I have to move back to a country that I may have left because I want to give my family a better life.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I'm wondering about, just because you touched on it a few times, and it's pretty interesting, but you've worked with so many unique personalities. Of course, there's a lot of the work is, you know, basic everyday people coming to work at everyday companies. But tell us a little bit about maybe one of the most unique or one of the most interesting and some of the different components about that, one of your clients, it'd probably be on when you do the personal non-business side.
So it's actually both. I mean, we did that Off-Broadway show, and that was unbelievable to be involved in something like that. It was just, you know, collecting the information and supporting documents. We did a personal chef, and, you know, he worked in Michelin star restaurants. It's a very interesting to see these, you know, the people who have these accomplishments.
Yeah.
And I've been asking him to cook me a meal for years, and he hasn't done it. So
that had to be built into the compensation beforehand.
Next time we do anything for him, I'll
into
tell
the
him.
contract.
Fine print. Yeah.
But beyond that, I think the most interesting people we've worked with. So in my pro bono practice, you know, I mostly focus on people who are in the U.S. or come to the U.S. seeking medical care. That's generally what that consists of. There's a couple other ones, but that's basically it. And there
was more opportunity for, I mean, if they have a specific condition
so there's the B visa, which is the tourist or visitor for pleasure, visitor for business visa. If you come to the U.S. for seeking life-saving care, in theory, you could stay on that and request extensions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I work with a family where they have a child who's sick, and the only place, and they have gone everywhere, the only place they found anyone who's even attempting to help their child is in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, dealing with that has been fulfilling. And
absolutely.
Pro bono, we're not charging for it, but it's a way of utilizing, you know, the God-given gifts or the work that I've done, at least.
Absolutely.
For a way. On the flip side, though, on the non-pro bono side, most interesting clients. I mean, I have had clients we had a client where it was for a company, but they were bringing in a clothing designer who literally designed one-off clothing for Beyonce and for, I mean, you name Prince this and that, like, you know, because they're not going to Marshalls or going to Nordstrom to buy clothing. They're getting, and so that was what she did. And what was crazy was that she was so humble that it was like pulling teeth to get her to admit to the things that she had done, which were just unbelievable.
But you would need to know that to submit.
We'd have to provide that to the adjudicator. Otherwise, you know, just take our word, this person's fantastic. That doesn't work. That we have to provide the evidence. But yeah, I mean, we've had some people who've just done unbelievable things.
I'm interested about the pro bono stuff you were talking about because it seems like it's, you know, a pretty important piece to you. How do you get connected with people who need that type of stuff? Do they just contact you directly, or is there some sort of facilitator for that?
So I just really let the universe kind of pull this together for me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people who know me, especially in the schools, you know, they'll contact me sometimes. In this
And
specific,
just, I know of a certain case.
yeah,
that
I know of a
needs
certain
help.
case.
Yeah.
Can you help with it?
That's great.
And in this case with the family, it was during COVID, and they needed to come to the U.S. for the treatment. And the problem is that you couldn't come from Europe to the United States unless you had a waiver. And so another attorney who somehow knew the family, they contacted. She'd never done a waiver before. We had done a number of them for our corporate clients, where they needed to come to the U.S. And so I said, yeah, we can, like easily. It's something we can handle. And that's how that relationship started. It was something that a colleague couldn't or never had any experience with, and we just, we were able to jump in on and take over that. And that's how it started their relationship.
That's great.
In talking about your interesting clients and all of the people that you've probably met along the way or have had connections to other people, I'm just curious.
Okay.
Because kids are usually very humbling. What do your kids think of all of the people that you've probably met or, spoken about? Like, are they like, wow, yeah, that's so cool. Like my dad met this person who designed clothes for Beyonce. Or are they like, yeah, it's whatever.
I think my children roll their eyes at everything at this point because they're mostly
It's
all
the age,
teenagers.
yeah.
But I think sometimes they think it's cool. Sometimes we meet people who I've done work for. I mean, I don't tell my kids, the work or who I'm doing
Right.
it for, except for that MBA OT. That was the one time I mentioned it.
Right.
But I think they recognize what I'm doing. And the question comes up often. I mean, I've spoken in their classes where I went into my son's 4th grade class and we went through the naturalization exam because they were learning about U.S. civics. And so it's a civics test. And I've gone and spoken, as a lawyer in front of the classes. So people know what I do and my kids know what I do. But I'm just trying to think if there's ever been, there are times where a client will invite us down. We went to a farm. One of our clients owns a farm. And we were on vacation, so we went to their farm and they took us on a tour. Like that maybe the most,
Yeah. Just like,
relationship we've had or the most integration with the client. But
change of pace and scenery,
they know what I do. And I think that the older ones are starting to respect it because they see that a lot of it is about being because they see in their own lives, right? Teachers, and they see that there are people who are the subject matter experts in their lives for this or that. And so they start to see that as being what we're doing. And I don't know if that's the answer, but that's...
Yeah. No, I just asked because I know, like, right now with my kids, it's like, I feel like everything my husband and I do, they think it's super cool.
Yeah.
But that's because they're young. Obviously, when they get older, it's like, that's not as exciting.
believe me, Felicia, it'll be less impressive. Yeah.
Well, just wait. You go to conferences and you come back and they just want to know what swag you brought them.
You
Yes.
can get it in the airport and they're happy.
Exactly.
That's what I do.
That's
Yeah.
what it is. How
Well,
many
but-
pens we've given
I
to
mean,
the
me and
kids?
Dakota and I, we were so impressed with all these events and people that you've met. So I just was wondering if your family was like, wow, yeah, that's really cool.
I think they know of a couple of the people who I think are the coolest. I mean, clearly, I'm not hanging out with rock stars or
Right. You're not going on the tour bus or anything.
exactly. So that's not even if I'm doing the work, I'm doing the work behind the
Right.
scenes.
Absolutely. So Ari, are there any other topics that we didn't hit on that you think, hey, our audience should know about this, or your experiences that you've had that can help illuminate the processes that we've talked about a little bit?
Certainly. So I just one word I would say that, as I mentioned before, about not shying away from hiring someone who's not a U.S. citizen. You can really, I wouldn't say it's an untapped area because clearly people are hiring, but I think that we have to be open to that. I think employers should really be open to working with, or even recruiting abroad. These are things that are very easy to do depending on the situation. For example, there's, we talk about the O visa. If you meet somebody who really meets the criteria, it's a very simple process to bring them over. The same thing with people from Canada in certain areas. There are 36 professions, including architects. I met at the same conference I met. There was a architect there, and she was saying how hard it is to find architects. And I said, I can bring over a Canadian architect tomorrow. It really requires nothing. If you just need draftspeople, like we can help.
That's really interesting that you say that, though, because then, I mean, right when you said that, I thought, well, you are almost an international recruiter.
So we don't do the recruitment.
Yep.
But what we do, though, is we explain to people.
But you might have a roster of folks.
But even if we don't, then the employer will then say, hey, they'll put a LinkedIn, or I'm sorry, not LinkedIn, maybe LinkedIn, or they'll put it on Indeed, and they'll expand it out to Canada now because they know that this is something they can do. And they didn't know. They were like, okay, I have to hire from here. But there were so many people who would seek to come to the U.S. for 3 years, whatever 6-year term, whatever long it is, whether or not they want a green card or not. In fact, there are whole communities on the border with Canada where people come over to work and then go home at night, right across the border, every single day. And it's become because they recognize that there was a value. So Buffalo, New York is, Canadians come in and they go out. So you just have to be open to the idea of it. That's number one. I get a lot of phone calls where it's the first time we want to hire this person. And I'm really sitting there just kind of, reassuring them that it's not a complicated process. And I go through, we generally do flat fees. And part of the reason we do flat fees is because we want the process to be very, not just clear, but they know exactly what they're getting into, what it is that's going to cost from A to Z. We give them, on the first email that I send them, we say, listen, this is our legal fee, this is the filing fee, this is the fee for the FedEx, this is, exactly what it is. So the CTO of the company is happy, which means that everyone else is happy. But we want it to be a very practical and process. So that's what I say, don't shy away from these things. Two is, I think that, from an immigration perspective, I said a lot of what we do is relationship, holding hands and talking to people about the process, but also that there's sometimes benefits, some loyalty that comes with taking a chance on a foreign employee. And sometimes from our perspective, a lot of the people we're working with are really talented. I mean, some of these, I don't understand half of cybersecurity stuff, SOC 1 and SOC 2 and,
oh man, we undergo
those.
that here, and I don't like to hear I don't even like to hear the word.
I was at a conference for cybersecurity, and someone was giving out socks, and one had the word SOC 1 on it and SOC 2 on it.
We give out socks.
That's so funny.
But we didn't put that on it.
No,
we just put our
it's
logo.
more of
It
a
would
side
be a
by
weird
side.
thing for us to advertise. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, but
Like
people
on
do want to
socks.
know that we as a tech firm do undergo that
Yes.
compliance.
Yeah, we had a bank as a client. We
Protocol.
had to certify because we were subject to the financial
Right.
IT
yeah.
requirements. So we've been able to meet those requirements as well. But it's I think, I don't know if it was at this firm or the previous firm, but I don't know, I'm trying to think of any other practical information. That's really about it. I mean, I think that's,
Yeah. Jamie, we're going to have to give Ari some of our socks.
I got a pair.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Oh, good.
All right,
They're
well.
so comfy.
Are they? I'll try them.
Which ones did he get?
The tall ones.
The tall one. We have tall ones now, but we have some with our old logo on them that are from like 4 years ago, and we were just at a conference in Atlanta, and multiple people came up to us because we've been going to this conference for a while. It's the National Business Officers Association for Independent Schools.
Okay.
Have you been to that?
I didn't go, but I was
I
told
think
about
Lisa
it.
mentioned it to you. Yeah,
me that.
it's a great one. You should check it out for next year. Next year, is it in New York next year?
Oh,
There
really?
you go. Perfect.
All right.
Ah.
We'll go there.
You don't have to nothing against Atlanta, but I think New York's a little better now.
It's a little easier to get to.
Get to, and maybe a little better. I don't know. We didn't get to do anything fun there. We didn't get to go to the Coca-Cola factory.
Oh, no.
Well, Dakota, you were there for one night.
I was there for less than 24
Yeah,
hours.
so
That's
you-
right.
Well, it's a lot of fun, the Cocoa Factory. So.
Yeah. But we're happy that it's funny. Our sales team travels around so much, and you'd be surprised to hear how often someone might be like, "Oh man, I got to go to a Vegas again. Are you serious?
Yeah.
I don't want to fly all the way to Vegas again." But after a while, it becomes kind of like a pain. So something like New York or Boston, or you can just drive.
Yeah,
is
that's nice.
A pretty nice change, or take the train.
Yeah. What's the best? I put this out there. I went to a conference. I didn't bring any swag to that conference. I met Lisa, but I was at a conference a few weeks earlier, and I put it out on LinkedIn. I said, "What's the best swag you've received?" Because I don't want to spend the money on. I want to get
Right.
Everyone does stress balls. Like we got to do something a little different.
You're right. Stress balls and then pens, and it's like, come on, the mints. I just don't know about the mints.
It's-
I understand. The thing is, I think this, like, if it's like too practical, people are like, come on, can you give me something a little bit like
You want something
interesting?
you wouldn't spend money on. It's like a birthday present, right?
There you
don't
go,
want
yeah.
something-
So
So,
Well, I wouldn't
what
spend
did-
money on a stress
So
ball.
what did
That's true.
LinkedIn say?
so LinkedIn. So this actually surprised me, and I followed the advice, and it was very good. Is I actually got canvas bags,
Yep.
And-
we've gotten those before.
big canvas bags.
Yeah.
not big, like bigger than what other people had.
Yeah.
And so when people walk by, I said, "Take a bag because you can put all your swag in this bag."
Mm-hmm.
And so I had everybody walking around with my bag because it was nicer
Yeah.
and bigger.
There you go.
And everyone was able to put everyone else's swag in it.
It is good. Yeah.
So I thought that was a fantastic suggestion. I did that, and we'll.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite, I usually have gone to SHRM a couple times, the Society of Human Resource Management conference, like the national one that they do. And my favorite thing from there was, it's so silly, but there was some company, and of course I don't even remember the name of the company, but they had like a claw machine. So it was like this teeny tiny claw machine, and so then you did
You mean
the
like you'd see it at arcade?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then you got to just play the claw machine.
Oh, it's
and
fun.
the only thing in it was these like tiny little like keychain stuffed animals. So nothing overly exciting, but it was like I got to play the claw game. And then
Yeah.
they let you keep playing till you win. So it was a good one.
SHRM is the conference where, I mean, people will, there's so many exhibitors there and so many
Yeah.
attendees. People will go all out on the swag. Like, so, I mean, the games, you know,
Yeah.
the spinning game, they've just got so many things. They'll do anything to get
Yeah.
people to come into the booth. But my favorite one that, you know, the company that does the like trail mix and the peanuts and all that, and they do like employee wellness programs, but it's called nuts.com.
Yes.
But their booth, I mean, they've got like they had the like machine, not the machine, but what you would see in like an old candy shop. You can basically like make your own trail mix.
Oh, that's fun.
And that was pretty sweet because people love food. Not
Yeah.
like mints or like
Yeah.
cheap chocolate, but like
When you're walking around.
good food.
Especially-
you want like some good refreshments
when
or
you're
some good drinks.
walking around the exhibit hall.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I like
so
that.
that's always good. It's always good to have like a good, like fresh, interesting refreshment, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was at a conference. I think it was in Tel Aviv, and it was a patent law firm, and they had a punching machine. You know, like you punch it, it tells you how hard.
Yeah.
And then they had prizes based upon how hard you punched it.
That must have been
And
fun.
if
I
you
like
hit a
that.
certain
Jamie's
amount-
Jamie's like, you know what?
Yes.
Yeah. And if you hit a certain amount, then you were entered into like win a bottle of liquor that they would send you because they couldn't. I don't know if they could.
Right.
Oh,
But
yeah.
It was. I mean, everybody stopped, and it became like a thing that everybody was like. You know, you had groups of like 5 or 6 people walking around together, and like, you know, it was like hold my swag, and then they'd all take turns, and it became like a, you know, like people would be like, you know, oh, I did this and you did that. And it
We
was
are
really.
Yeah.
We're doing that.
So-
I love that.
That's the secret. You just have to have a game.
Yeah.
The prize can be super boring. You just have to have a game.
Although a bottle of high end liquor for punching something really hard sounds like a lot of people would be interested.
But more people were. It was great. But I say it's more about the interpersonal because that was something to talk about. So the liquor was almost like secondary than like the ego.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
Yeah.
That was what really.
Absolutely.
I said that was smart. I said if we ever
You
go
got to
to
walk around with your score too. Yeah.
Yeah, just put it like on your, you know, tattoo. But I said if we ever do like something like that, that's my plan. I was on Alibaba trying to figure out how much would it cost. It's not cheap to get one.
Oh, or even one
Really?
of those ones where you have the hammer and you like hit
Yeah.
it and it.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
But the punching is interesting. Well, we're gonna have to we'll look at Alibaba for that. We've ordered from Alibaba before.
Yeah.
You ever see those video brochures?
No.
It's a folder,
Okay.
thick folder, and you open it up, and there's a little TV screen that plays a
Really?
video that you've uploaded. We sent them to clients a few years ago, and the only problem is they're difficult to dispose of. We
Yeah.
didn't know that when we sent them out.
We had like hundreds in the basement.
And when
for
I
a
say
while.
when I say dispose of, I mean like it's illegal to dispose of them. Like, how do you get rid of them? You have to bring them to like a special place.
Yeah.
So we're not going to really
You
do
gotta
this
Shawshank
anymore.
that.
But
Like,
we
you
got
take
them from
10.
Alibaba.
like the local recycling place. Like, oh, here's 10. And like
Yeah,
the next week
right.
come back, do 10. It's like, you know, it's a process. Like 3-4 years later, you're done.
Yeah.
But it's
Right? Yeah. But it's interesting because it delivers a video
yeah,
in a format that people aren't expecting.
yeah,
Yeah. But we talk about conferences. I think a lot of marketing is things that people don't expect. And today, with everything being virtual and electronic and email and whatever, the things that people don't expect are meeting you face to face,
yeah,
direct mail, just old school things are just
Yeah.
like, you know, that's how you could get noticed. Because when we talk about email, I mean, the amount of sales emails
Yeah.
I get, I'm sure you get, I mean, it's, you can't read them all. And they all, most of them say the same thing.
No, I agree. You have to figure out how to stand out. I mean,
Yeah.
in my area, we're mostly referral, right? So it's someone.
I was going to
has an
ask that.
issue.
It is, yeah.
because it's they'll come to their attorney and say, hey, you do our X, right? You're our employment lawyer, you're whatever it is, and here we have an employment issue, or you're our corporate lawyer, or you're our, you do the contracts. So do you know someone because we want to hire? And that's how the vast majority. I don't really approach companies generally and say, hey, use me, because there's no nexus or timing, right? It's not like you have an immigration issue every single day. You're not hiring someone who has it. And so
it's more when that comes up,
Yeah.
hey, who do you know that does this? Because now we're in this, and it's
Exactly.
that's how you would find out.
So the only time where I don't do is with, like, for example, the conference for schools. There's actually something different here, which is that there's a teacher shortage, right? There aren't enough teachers to fill all the positions in schools right now. And the reason for it, I mean, we can go into the, whatever the reason, whether it's private companies are hiring the teachers as opposed to, or whatever it is, but we're having this issue. And so I decided when I started going to this conference, the reason I went there was not because I wanted to be there it's because, hey, listen, I can provide you a solution, right? You're going to have an issue. And so here I am. I actually have a solution. I mean, it requires recruiting a little wider, but
International,
yeah.
I mean, it reminds me. I mean, my kids go to a very small parochial school, and the budget for a parish school is just not anywhere close to what public schools can offer teachers.
Yeah.
So at that point, you talk about a teacher shortage, but the teacher shortage for that, who wants to work in that type of school, it's a very unique person. And so
let's say you had a teacher from the UK, new teacher, young, just graduated, taught 2 years in their local school, and now they have the opportunity to come to the U.S. for 3 years to teach. So there's no minimum salary on a J. And so now, if you have a good program, they'll come, they'll live in another country, they'll gain knowledge. When they go back, they might be more, desirable because they have this the time they spend abroad.
Oh, I bet.
And so it's a win-win. And so that's why, so there I'll market directly to companies, or the schools rather, not the companies, but the schools. When we market to companies, usually it's when they're small companies where they've just finished raising funds, and now they're coming to the U.S. because the U.S. is the single largest market. So, for example, we have a company out of somewhere in Europe where they just finished raising their B round, the A round for, I think it was 1.5 or 1.6 million, and they realized that the technology requires them to be in the U.S. They need to be selling here. And so, we'll market ourselves, we'll go to conferences where it's a lot of startups for that reason, so they know that they can have someone to call.
Oh,
but even so, the schools are more appropriate because that's where it's, they have an issue, and now we help them to find a solution.
But beyond that, just I-9 compliance in general, it sounds like a simple form, but there's a lot more to it.
I would say that if you're, it's a liability. How many audits are there per year? I mean, at one time there were like 3,000 audits. So the chance of being, hit by lightning is probably higher than being audited. But now that's increasing. I think it's like 9 or 15,000 audits per year. And again, if it's complaint-based, you never know if it's going to show up at your
exactly.
Yes. So if there's a company, I'm going to make a little pitch here. If there's a company
go ahead.
that has the time or has the resources, or it's worthwhile, it's an ounce of prevention here, is, we could do training, maybe an hour with the person, go through the form, explain to them exactly how to fill it out. Usually when they email us questions, I don't charge to respond to a quick question about, something. I got an email last night from someone. He's like, hey, can I hire someone with an ITIN? And I'm like, no, that's not a social security number. That doesn't provide any basis for employment. But, we can do a sample audit. There are things we can do remotely for a school or a company that would give them a little bit of, be able to sleep better at night.
I was going to say, I think it would give any team peace of mind, but then also you've got a good foundation. And if you're aware of, for example, I can recruit internationally now. I feel a little bit more comfortable, and I've got a contact who's an expert in this.
Exactly.
Who I can rely on if anything ever came up.
So again, we can do that. We can do that training, but it's more that now you're doing it right going forward, and that's the key. It's really just it's one time to go over it. You now know where the resources are, and so you'll continue doing that. You'll be vigilant on that point going forward, and then if something should come up, clearly we can be a resource for you. And as I said, if there ever comes a time where there's a need for international a non-citizen employee, that's something we could definitely assist with. And about again, we see ourselves as we're a service provider. This is what we do. We're there to help you to conduct your business in a proper way and make sure that you don't fall into any pitfalls along the way. That's really what it is.
Absolutely. Where can people find you? Email, business, LinkedIn?
So you can email me directly at arif@afarkaslaw.com. We're on LinkedIn. We have a website. It's afarkaslaw.com. I don't know if we have TikTok. I don't really understand TikTok.
If you're on LinkedIn, my advice would just be stick with one and do one really good.
I think so. I think LinkedIn is the place to be. It's like Facebook for, old people. I don't know. It's like Facebook for.
Oh, LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's professional. It's getting a little more unprofessional. People are sometimes treating it like, okay, this isn't about your dog. Like, this is.
But I think
But
LinkedIn.
then it turns into pet insurance, so that's how they relate.
I
it.
mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it's they can reach me there.
I
guess
just
through you
offended
guys.
so many people who put their dog all over LinkedIn every day, but whatever.
Cut that out.
I don't have a dog.
But if they can contact you guys for my information,
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Who else?
we'll put your information, Ari, of course, in the notes for the show and on our website. But yeah, absolutely. So defending your business from the I-9 audit and other strategies and best practices, featuring Ari Farkas. Ari, thanks a lot for coming in. We appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having
Thank
us.
you
It's
so
been-
much.
It's been so much fun. We should do this again.
Yeah, we can.
Anytime.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Checkwriters. Be sure to follow us on Apple, YouTube, or wherever you view your favorite podcasts. Stay tuned for future episodes where we'll continue to uncover the secrets behind successful organizations.